The boy tries to buy a handy weapon with just 2 silver coins, but the shopkeeper tells him bluntly that with this little money he can only pick some junk from the copper offerings over there. Ignoring the shopkeeper's sarcastic tone, the man goes to the copper weapon section and uses his appraisal skill on each piece one by one, finding exactly what he expected: worthless junk with 0 durability and 0 strength. Just when he is about to give up, a strangely shaped old black sword catches his eye, but before he can use his appraisal skill, something strange happens, making the man think he is dreaming, and he quickly uses appraisal on the old sword. Hearing the words "same kind" makes the man instantly remember the weird things from last night. Our main character, Faite, is someone living at the very bottom of society, barely surviving, because his talent skill Gluttony is useless, except for making him constantly hungry, and his level and attributes are pitifully stuck at 1. With dreams of becoming a dancer, he can't even hunt goblins and survives only by working under the 3 Tiblaliku Holy Knight siblings guarding the city gates. Although these siblings are talented, they are arrogant and cruel, humiliating Faite every time while using him as a human punching bag for their amusement. The female Holy Knight, Rochesi, who can't stand their cruelty, often helps Faite out of trouble, and Faite sees her as his goddess. But precisely because of this, Faite doesn't want to drag Rochesi down with him and chooses to bear all the humiliation alone. Some people worry Faite might end up tortured to death, like the previous guard, but Faite has no other choice. One day, on his way home from the tavern, Faite accidentally discovers thieves invading the city and chooses to chase them alone. After a round of fighting, Faite thinks Rochesi has dealt with everything, but unexpectedly, an injured thief runs toward her direction. Faite instinctively wants to run away, but to avoid causing trouble for Rochesi, he decides to be brave for once, and with a single stab, the thief dies. Something miraculous happens at that moment. Faite's Gluttony skill activates, and although he is still level 1, his attribute values skyrocket 100-fold, and he even absorbs the appraisal skill and poison heart skill. Before Faite can process what just happened, Rochesi runs over and grabs his hands with concern, and strangely, Faite can hear Rochesi's inner voice for a moment before it disappears again. Rochesi thanks Faite for providing the information because without it, she would have been blamed if the thieves had succeeded. To thank him, she suggests Faite work for her family, which makes Faite very happy. But he also worries that the Tiblaliku siblings might trouble both him and Rochesi because of this. Rochesi promises Faite she will handle it, and Faite finally agrees to her invitation with relief. Back at his place, Faite is filled with hope for his awakened Gluttony skill, thinking maybe this time he can truly become the dancer he dreams of being. Early the next morning, he runs excitedly to the blacksmith shop to buy a weapon, leading to the scene at the beginning. Upon learning that Faite is switching jobs, the Tiblaliku siblings are very angry, but because the Heart family Rochesi belongs to is one of the kingdom's 5 great noble families, they decide to turn a blind eye. After obtaining the grid sword, the first thing Faite does is find goblins to practice on, and with a single swing, the goblin falls, triggering his Gluttony skill again, allowing him to acquire the stamina enhancement skill. Faite is thrilled, feeling as if he can see his limitless future. That night, he tirelessly hunts goblins, increasing his attributes from 100 to over 1,000, and learns the physical enhancement skill, experiencing hunger-free moments for the first time. Grid explains to Faite that normally, defeating monsters increases one's level, but the Gluttony skill can steal the enemy's attributes and skills without gaining experience, meaning Faite will always remain level 1, but his attributes will grow crazily with each enemy defeated. Grid warns that Gluttony is a skill that defies the laws of the gods, and Faite must never let outsiders find out, or it will bring trouble. Killing 38 goblins earns him 3.8 silver coins, much more than what Faite earned in 2 years as a guard combined. Just as he is about to treat himself to roasted meat he hasn't had in 5 years, a vicious-looking man rushes out of an alley, crashing into Faite while holding a little girl who is too scared to say a word. But Faite, with his mind-reading skill, clearly hears her screaming for help in her heart. Faite uses appraisal on the man and sees that he is a skilled fighter with hidden talent skills, making it hard for Faite to act rashly despite having higher attributes. Grid asks Faite what he plans to do, and Faite follows the man to an abandoned warehouse where he overhears the man planning to sell the girl as a plaything to the Holy Knights while the girl is crying silently. Grid tries to persuade Faite to stay out of it, but seeing the girl's situation makes Faite empathize, remembering what it feels like to be bullied, and he decides to interfere no matter what. The man wakes up from unconsciousness, realizing his eyes have turned blood red, accompanied by intense hunger, and he believes this is related to what happened 2.5 days ago. Faite, once a useless person, awakened his Gluttony skill after killing for the first time, not only devouring the enemy's soul, but also absorbing their attributes and skills. Using his newly gained appraisal and mind-reading skills, Faite escaped from the blacksmith with the demon sword Grid, then found the little girl kidnapped by the human trafficker. Just as he is about to rescue the girl, the trafficker returns, and with Faite's current strength, he could easily deal with him. But to avoid hurting the girl, Faite pretends to flee, leading the trafficker into a dead-end alley, creating the illusion that he is cornered and about to be caught. The moment the trafficker trafficker was about to strike, the main character suddenly knocked over a box beside him and launched a surprise attack on the trafficker, leaving a bloody gash on his face, causing the trafficker to fly into a rage and prepare to unleash his ultimate move. But Grid could see it was the dangerously swift blade skill and immediately ordered the main character to strike down with sword and body together, and the main character followed without hesitation, causing the trafficker to fall instantly. And under the main character's questioning, the trafficker confessed that it was Herd, one of the 3 Tiblaliku siblings, who was buying these children to use as playthings, and the main character took Sahara to eat the first piece of meat in his life, making Sahara cry tears of joy, as he was just like the main character once was, a lowborn with a useless skill, abandoned at birth without mercy. And the main character knelt down and told Sahara the same words his father once told him, and the main character found himself becoming even stronger, learning the concealment talent and one-handed sword skill. And the next morning, the main character put on his newly bought clothes and arrived at the Hart family mansion. Its luxurious beauty leaving people speechless, and Rochesi, dressed in casual clothes, was a sight to behold, though the only strange thing was a grave in the garden. And Rochesi explained that 5 days ago, her father's crusade team was wiped out by a heavenly dragon in Galia, forcing her to take up the role of head of the Hart family from today. And Rochesi hoped the main character could help her revive the family, and the main character agreed without hesitation. But just as they were about to shake hands, he pulled his hand back, feeling it too perverted to hear the inner voice of his goddess, and the main character quickly integrated into life at the Hart family, getting along well with colleagues, but strangely feeling hungrier and hungrier, even fainting from hunger while talking to Rochesi. And when he woke up, he found his eyes had turned blood red, and Grid explained that once the gluttony skill has tasted the flavor of souls, it can never stop craving them, and the hunger for souls will only grow stronger, and if he does not devour souls regularly, he will fall into madness. So that night, the main character joined a goblin hunt, and while meeting up with other dancers, he could clearly smell the delicious scent of souls on them. And Grid told him it was because he was in a hunger amplification state, a temporary boost generated by the gluttony skill to more efficiently devour souls, allowing the user to see clearly at night like daytime, to track prey through scent, and most frighteningly, to make weaker prey lose the ability to move. And hunting goblins now felt as easy as hitting wooden stakes, but these low-level monsters no longer satisfied the hunger of gluttony. So under Grid's lead, the main character slaughtered his way through the giant goblin nest, only then relieving the hunger amplification. But suddenly the ground trembled, and a dangerously sweet soul scent drifted past the main character, belonging to the strongest being in this forest, the Goblin King, who was level 30, but whose attribute values were not much different from the main character's now, making it a fight worth taking. Though the troublesome part was that the Goblin King had an auto-healing skill, making a prolonged battle disadvantageous, but the main character was determined to obtain such a wonderful talent. So as the Goblin King was eating, the main character launched a sneak attack from behind, chopping off the Goblin King's arm within moments. Even the main character was shocked by his terrifying strength, and the Goblin King, furious, unleashed a barrage of attacks at the main character, who dodged them all easily. And under Grid's command, the main character counterattacked, defeating the Goblin King within 2 rounds. And after devouring the soul, the main character's attribute values doubled again, and he learned the auto-healing skill. But before he could be happy, Grid demanded the main character unlock his first form at the cost of sacrificing all his current attribute values as an offering. And the main character was shocked at how greedy the demon sword was and refused outright. But Grid warned that if the main character did not comply, he would lose the qualification to use him, forcing the main character to choose between becoming stronger alone or growing stronger together with the demon sword, and the main character decisively chose the latter, with Grid promising not to disappoint him. And after sacrificing all his attributes, Grid emitted a strange light and transformed from a demon sword into a demon bow, instructing the main character to test its power on another Goblin King. And as the main character pulled the bowstring, a magical arrow formed instantly, shooting out and automatically tracking its prey, and within moments, another Goblin King fell at the main character's feet. And that night, the main character sent all the rewards from this hunt to the monastery where Sahara was staying, and ever since the main character single-handedly wiped out the Goblin tribe and left the ears of the Goblin Kings at the orphanage gate, 2 rumors spread in the city, one about a powerful and kind dancer appearing in the capital, and the other about an extremely violent wandering monster near the capital. And Rochesi, as a holy knight, heard the rumors and disguised herself to gather information about the monster in the city. But because she dressed too simply, the main character did not recognize her and thought a thief had broken into the house. And after clearing the misunderstanding, Rochesi simply took the main character with her into the city. And along the way, Grid kept teasing the main character about his relationship with Rochesi, almost making the main character fight with his sword in public twice. And as they walked into the crowded market, a commotion broke out as people moved aside in fear, staring at someone approaching from afar with more terror than if they had seen a monster. And upon closer look, it was a red-haired holy knight with an arrogant and detestable air. And as the red-haired holy knight walked past the main character, his stomach growled at that exact moment, making the red-haired holy knight think the main character was mocking him, and he stormed over in anger, and the main character, not wanting trouble, immediately knelt down to apologize. But the red-haired holy knight was not satisfied and lifted his foot to strike the main character. But at the critical moment, Rochesi intervened to stop him, surprising the red-haired holy knight that someone dared oppose him. And as he turned to get angry, he found the woman in front of him looked familiar, and someone in the crowd recognized Rochesi. And as her identity was about to be revealed, Grid suggested that the main character and Rochesi pretend to be lovers to bluff their way out. And so, under the gaze of the crowd, the two awkwardly pretended to be a couple in public, leaving the onlookers stunned. The curious crowd slowly drifted away, and the crisis was temporarily over. But at that moment, the main character accidentally heard Rochesi's inner thoughts again, and on the street, people were still talking about the mysterious dancer and the wandering monster, while Rochesi asked around for a long time but didn't get any useful information, only hearing that the dancer might know more about all this. And only then did the main character suddenly realize that the so-called mysterious dancer and the wandering monster were both himself. So to keep Rochesi from suspecting anything, he brought her to his usual tavern to gather more news, where the tavern owner explained that people usually hunted goblins to cut off their ears and exchange them for money, but the goblin ears left behind after last night's slaughter were all perfectly intact, so everyone believed this must have been done by a powerful monster. And some even suspected this monster was the terrifying crow, because not just anyone could kill a Goblin King, and the matter had already alarmed the royal family, who planned to send holy knights to hunt down the monster. And upon hearing this, the main character's face turned pale, for if Rochesi found out he was the monster, his beautiful dream of love would be ruined. And just then, a group of fierce-looking dancers walked in. The bald-headed leader immediately set his filthy eyes on the beautiful Rochesi and disgustingly reached out his dirty hand. But before the main character could step in as a hero, Rochesi slapped the bald man into the wall with one palm, and the one-eyed man recognized this as a move only holy knights could use. So Rochesi stopped pretending, and the few who realized who she was immediately knelt and begged for mercy, even offering money to buy their lives. And after a speech full of righteousness, everyone present was moved by Rochesi's justice and kindness, and the main character silently vowed to protect this precious girl in front of him forever. And on the way home, the main character and Rochesi stumbled upon the three Tibleliku siblings bullying a child, and with a look from Rochesi, the main character rescued the boy from Herd's hands and took him to eat roasted meat skewers. And seeing the boy's happy face made the main character suddenly remember his own time when he first arrived in the capital, penniless and helpless after his father died, surviving only because a kind female holy knight often helped him. And after sending the boy back to his mother, the main character wanted to say something to Rochesi, but was completely mesmerized by how beautiful she looked under the setting sun, with the doves flying slowly behind her. And as this wonderful day ended, the main character now faced his biggest problem: how to hunt without revealing his true identity. And Grid came up with an idea, which was to wear a magic mask that could block recognition. While in a dark room elsewhere, several holy knights sat around a table plotting a conspiracy, and the main character, who had accidentally awakened his gluttony skill, decided to challenge a boss far above his level, but found that the magic arrows strong enough to instantly kill a Goblin King were caught bare-handed by the boss, and a casual blow from the boss left him completely defenseless. Yet the main character still charged forward without hesitation, because he had reasons he could not back down from, and since he had previously sacrificed all his attribute points to Grid, he had to return to the starter village to keep hunting goblins. And in order to raise his attribute points as much as possible before the holy knights came for him, the main character no longer avoided other dancers, which directly made him confirmed as the Lich. And the next day, the main character followed Rochesi to the Hart family's vineyard, which carried Rochesi's precious childhood memories, because it was here she grew from a girl who would cry at the sight of a spider into a brave and skilled holy knight. And the main character learned from the workers that Rochesi came back here every year, partly to help with the harvest, but mainly to drive off monsters, because every harvest season kobolds would come to steal resources. And upon hearing this, the main character's stomach started to growl, and the workers thought she was just hungry from all the work, but only she knew that it was Gluttony sending out the signal to hunt. And on the way back, the main character saw a white-haired girl carrying a huge axe, and from her clothes, she was clearly not from their country. And just as they were about to pass each other, the white-haired girl called out to the main character, and as he turned his head, he was shocked to see that she had the same red eyes he had when in the hunger amplification state. And the main character immediately used his appraisal skill, but it had no effect on the girl, who just turned and walked away without looking back. And the main character felt sure that Grid must know something about her, because normally Grid would chatter endlessly without being asked. But today he was unusually silent and flatly denied knowing anything, claiming he didn't know everything. And just then Rochesi caught up and told the main character that the white-haired girl must be from Galia, which 4,000 years ago was a prosperous military empire but was destroyed due to the spread of monsters, leaving some survivors wandering the world. And Rochesi said it was the first time he had seen such a pure-blooded Galia girl. And as he watched Rochesi's beautiful back, the main character couldn't help but worry whether she might get into danger when fighting monsters alone. But Rochesi told him not to worry, because she would take take the territory's dancers with her, and besides, those kobolds were just small fry for a holy knight like her. But that very night, the kobolds attacked the farm, and Rochesi and the main character followed their tracks to the kobolds' lair. And just as Rochesi was about to strike, a never-before-seen kobold jumped out of the bushes, and from its size and color, it was clearly an elite. And at that moment, Gluttony was already hard to suppress, and the main character used his appraisal skill to find out it was a warrior-level crown grievance monster called the Wailing Caller. And Grid told the main character that crown grievance monsters were born from accumulated hatred over many years and were extremely dangerous. So dangerous that even a holy knight like Rochesi might not be able to handle it. And the dancers from the territory, upon hearing this, immediately wanted to back out. But the clueless Rochesi promised everyone that as long as they followed her, they would definitely defeat the monster. And the main character was torn inside because with his current strength, he could not beat the crown grievance monster head-on. So that night, he snuck alone into the kobold lair, planning to devour the minions one by one to boost his stats and then use the stolen attribute points to take on the boss. And he had Grid transform into the demon bow and launched a surprise attack on the kobolds, quickly wiping out the small fry, and his attribute points soon broke through 100,000. And then he raised his hand and fired 2 magic arrows at the boss, but opponent easily neutralized them, and Grid told the main character to switch to close combat. But the boss did not dodge or flinch and instead unleashed a deadly close combat skill called Inch Mirror, a powerful move capable of piercing armor, and the main character hesitated for a moment, only to be ambushed by a kobold who grabbed his shoulder. But thanks to his auto-healing skill, he did not lose his fighting ability, and the boss then used a finishing move to send the main character flying into a small river. And as the kobold moved in to deliver the final blow, the main character, pretending to be unconscious, severed the kobold's arm. But the boss continued his relentless attacks, pushing the main character into a desperate situation. And seeing this, Grid ordered him to immediately sacrifice 10% of his attribute points to unleash a first-stage ultimate move. And the main character, after a brutal battle, finally defeated the crown grievance monster. But during the soul devouring, an unexpected resistance occurred within his body, and his right eye's pupil turned red, with Grid explaining that this was a recoil from devouring a high-quality soul for the first time. And the next morning, looking at the kobold corpses and the deep ravines left in the ground, everyone was left confused, and the only explanation Rochesi could think of was the Galia girl they had encountered yesterday, since it was rumored that the Galia had once fought alongside Rochesi, and the fighting abilities of the Galia people were said to surpass those of holy knights. And the main character finally sighed in relief upon hearing this. But before leaving, Rochesi's mother, Aisha, called him into the house alone, saying that she had seen all of her daughter's feelings clearly and sincerely, asked the main character to stay by her daughter's side to be her pillar after she herself passed away, which was also what the main character deeply wished for. But he was unsure if he, with his gluttony skill, was worthy of it, as gluttony was too greedy, and goblins could no longer satisfy his hunger, and in order to pursue higher quality souls, he would have to leave the capital. And in a tavern, the main character overheard that Herd, one of the 3 Tiblaliku siblings, had been assigned to hunt the Lich, while another holy knight was to be sent to the dangerous Galia. And a bad feeling arose in his heart, and as he feared, the holy knight sent to Galia was none other than Rochesi. And although he knew this was the Tiblaliku family's scheme, Rochesi had no choice, and the main character was filled with hatred, determined to make these despicable people pay. And in this October's fastest moving revenge story I have seen, after the main character awakened the gluttony skill that could devour others' abilities, he did not become arrogant, but continued to live quietly as a guest in the heroine's home while secretly growing stronger in his spare time. But just when he thought he could live peacefully, the heroine Rochesi was sent to the battlefield by the other holy knights, and the hero who killed monsters daily was now being slandered as the Lich by these people, and unable to bear it any longer, the main character prepared to take revenge on them. But unexpectedly, they came to him first, and to the main character's surprise, their movements seemed slow to him, like a movie in slow motion, and he defeated them easily without even using his sword, sending them fleeing. And Herd, the leading holy knight, was shocked by the Lich's strength, and as he hesitated about whether to flee, the main character calmly removed his mask, and upon seeing the main character's face, Herd was terrified, unable to even hold his sword steady, as he knew clearly that this man he had once bullied would never let him go. But still, Herd tried to scare the main character off by yelling at him, relying on his holy knight status, and the main character used his appraisal skill on Herd, finding that this arrogant man was actually quite weak, knowing only the holy sword technique exclusive to holy knights and nothing else. And Grid told the main character that Herd's artificial holy sword was worthless trash to him, and he should just cut it down. And seeing the main character wanting to duel with swords, Herd regained confidence, believing that the holy sword technique was the pinnacle of close combat. But he could never have imagined that his proud holy cross slash would be easily dodged by the main character, and with a casual swing, the main character sliced Herd's holy sword in half, shattering the last bit of Herd's confidence. And it was now time for the main character's revenge. Remembering everything Herd had done to him, the main character showed no mercy, grabbing Herd's head and smashing it against 3 trees before throwing him into the air and using 4 bloody thunderbirds to tear off his limbs, then stabbing his sword into Herd's heart while Herd screamed in pain, allowing the Gluttony skill to devour all of Herd's attributes and holy sword techniques. And with this, the main character could now become a revered holy knight, but he did not want the skills of such scum within him and instead sacrificed them all to Grid, which allowed Grid to awaken into his second stage broadsword form, a blade containing powerful curses capable of cutting through anything. And what the main character wanted most to cut through was the fact that Rochesi was going to Galia, and after putting on the pendant his father had given him, Rochesi smiled and bid farewell to the servants, promising that she would return victorious in 3 years, and worried that the Tible Liku family would trouble the main character during her absence. She thoughtfully recommended him to work at the Hart family's farm, and touched by her kindness, the main character immediately set off for Galia to protect Rochesi from the shadows, not knowing that at that moment in the capital, 2 forces had already set their sights on him, one with unclear intentions and the other already coveting the great sin weapon in his hand, the demon sword Grid. And at dusk, the main character arrived at the logistics city of Ditra, the place where he had lived with his father as a child, and in a restaurant, a weary man was begging several dancers to help their village with a monster problem, but the dancers mocked his small offering and cruelly humiliated him. And at that critical moment, the main character stepped forward, startling the man, not because he wanted to be a hero, but because he recognized the man in front of him, the village chief's son, Saito, who had often bullied him when he was a child living there, and after his dancer father died protecting the village chief and Saito had driven him out, leading him to drift into the capital, and now Saito was kneeling, sincerely begging the main character for help, and after hesitating for a moment, the main character agreed, not because he forgave these people, but because he wanted to return to the village to find memories of his father and, at the same time, let gluttony fill his stomach. And when the village chief saw that the person Saito brought back was Fate, his face was full of disdain, scolding Saito for being useless and bringing back such trash. And although Saito kept explaining that the main character was no longer the same, the village chief turned a deaf ear and even said that to buy time, he would offer this garbage as a sacrifice to the monsters, which enraged the main character. But after Saito's persuasion, he first went back to Saito's home, and after a heartfelt conversation, the main character realized that Saito was no longer the ignorant village chief's son he used to be, and Saito explained that powerful monsters had begun to appear in groups a month ago, destroying all the livestock in the village, and these monsters were good at flying and moved very mysteriously. And upon hearing this, Gluttony could not help but growl, and Saito, thinking the main character was hungry, got up to prepare dinner for him, while Grid reminded the main character that flying monsters were never simple, and the monsters Saito mentioned were most likely different demons, a cautious and cunning kind of monster, and Saito's daughter, seeing the main character talking to the air, thought he was starving and gave him a piece of candy, and without thinking much, the main character ate it. But soon after, his vision went black, and he fainted, and when Saito asked his daughter why, she said she had given him the candy her grandfather gave her. And upon hearing this, Saito's heart sank, realizing the village chief really intended to sacrifice the main character to the monsters. And just then, hordes of different demons invaded the village, and the girl had a condition that prevented her from riding in carriages, as she would always faint while riding, and she had walked nearly 200 kilometers, and the main character was here to retrieve something, but it was precisely because of her appearance that the main character got into big trouble, as the village chief used the child's hand to drug the main character and prepared to offer him as a sacrifice to the different demons. But before they could proceed, the different demons massacred the village, and after drinking the antidote Saito made, the main character barely regained consciousness and, using his appraisal skill, found that the different demons' stats were not that impressive, with only their rock bullet skill and flight ability being troublesome. So the main character immediately had Grid transform into the broadsword to cut down all the incoming rock bullets, and the different demons launched a combined attack, sending a massive fireball hurtling toward the main character's face, but he remained calm, raised the broadsword, and counterattacked, and after the broadsword extinguished the fireball, it bounced back and forth among the monsters, wiping out all the minions in the blink of an eye, and the main character's skill library was updated with the rock bullet skill, leaving only the different demon leader, who was level 47 with 5-digit attribute values, and had a passive fire-resistant skill in addition to rock bullet, and the different demon leader was now furious, charging at the main character madly, trying to detonate a rock bullet at close range. But the main character leaped high, swinging the broadsword, and in a flash of fire, he disemboweled the different demon leader, and although the monster was eliminated, the village could not be saved, and Saito suggested the main character stop being a dancer as it was too dangerous, but he had no idea that for the main character, who had awakened gluttony, this was the only way to live. And after saying goodbye to Saito, the main character took a carriage to Southchester as a bodyguard, but while passing through a valley, they were suddenly ambushed by bandits, causing the driver to panic. But with the main character's current strength, dealing with them would have been easy, yet before he could act, an unidentified object fell from the sky and exploded behind the bandits, instantly sending them to their doom. And as the smoke cleared, the main character saw that it was the Galia girl he had met once once at the farm, and as thanks, the driver offered her a ride. But as soon as she got in, both the driver and the horse collapsed, as her weapon could change its weight, and during their conversation, the main character learned that the girl's name was Mai, and she was an old acquaintance of Grid, and like the main character, she possessed one of the 7 deadly sins skills, so she liked to call herself Wrathful Mai, and referred to the main character as Gluttonous Fighte. And upon arriving in Southchester, they saw the Lord, Holy Knight Rudolph, rehearsing a play in the streets about driving out evil, and the driver told the main character that this was a performance prepared to welcome the Galia expedition army, and the main character realized he had arrived ahead of Rochesi and decided to find an inn to stay at. But at that moment, Mai fainted from hunger, and the main character had no choice but to carry her on his back, and the always silent Grid suddenly warned the main character that Mai had severe morning temper and to be careful, and as they searched for an inn, many enthusiastic residents greeted the main character, all saying the same thing, that the great Lord Rudolph welcomed his arrival. And at first, the main character thought it was because holy knights were respected here, but hearing it so many times made him suspicious and even stranger. Every person in the city had a mark on the back of their neck, each different, and Grid guessed this was a method of class division, which was not a good sign. And meanwhile, in the prison, Rudolph, who had just appeared kind and righteous, personally killed 2 civilians who had been acting as fake villains for him, simply because their acting was too poor to highlight his greatness. And while Mai was asleep, Grid explained to the main character about the deadly sin weapons, saying gluttony, wrath, greed, sloth, lust, and pride were all skills born in defiance of the gods' laws, known as deadly sin skills and deadly sin weapons. And gluttony, in particular, was the only one capable of breaking the level limit set by the gods, making it the most sinful power. And if the main character did not want to be consumed by gluttony's power, he would need to learn to resist it by maintaining a state of half-hunger. And the main character went out with Grid to hunt souls outside the city, with Grid instructing him not to let gluttony eat its fill at once but to feed it slowly. And before he finished speaking, a giant killer beast appeared before the main character, who had Grid transform into bow form, and while switching out an arrow, activated his newly learned flame bullet skill, turning the magic arrow into a more powerful fire arrow that obliterated the killer beast with a single shot. And as gluttony tried to devour the monster's soul, the main character forcibly suppressed the urge, and after repeating this process until midnight, the main character finally got the hang of it. But just then, he caught the scent of an incredibly sweet soul, family, and as expected not far away, a group of dancers was fighting a powerful crown grievance monster, clearly at a complete disadvantage. And just as they were worrying about how to escape, the main character fired an arrow that struck the monster, and the dancers warned him that even though holy knights were no match for such a crown grievance monster, and it was impossible for him to win alone. So if you liked this anime and want a part 2, let me know in the comments. I'll upload part 2 right away.